What if the goodbye starts before anyone even knows what's happening? They're still talking, they're still walking, they still remember who you are. But something about the way they behave feels like they're quietly letting go. These subtle changes often appear years before memory loss is diagnosed, but they're often overlooked. In this video, you'll discover 9 quiet behaviors people show when their mind is starting to slip, even if no one realizes it yet. Watch closely. These aren't accidents. They may be the brain's way of saying goodbye before the person even knows why. Number 1. They suddenly give away sentimental items. 2.5 years before her diagnosis, Marcia, 72, began giving away deeply personal belongings. It started when she handed her granddaughter a small velvet box and said, "I want you to have this, just in case I forget." Inside was a gold ring from her mother. No birthday, no occasion. Just a quiet, final, feeling moment. In the months that followed, she gave away her wedding china, old letters, and favorite photos. When asked why, she simply said, "It's time." No one questioned it, until she forgot her grandson's name and asked why her husband wasn't home while he sat beside her. Experts report that in early dementia, the brain can trigger a subtle sense of urgency, a feeling that something is changing, even if the person can't explain it. This quiet unease often leads to giving away prized possessions, especially those tied to memory or identity. It's not always a conscious goodbye, but it may signal the mind is quietly preparing for loss before anyone realizes. Number 2, they pull away from group activities. Leon, 75, never missed poker night. For over a decade, he met friends every Thursday, cards, coffee, and loud laughter. But 3 years before his Alzheimer's diagnosis, he began making excuses. First he was tired, then it was too noisy. Eventually, he stopped going. His friends were puzzled, but Leon just shrugged it off. What they didn't see was that he was struggling, forgetting the rules, repeating stories, going silent when someone pointed it out. Quietly, he pulled away from the thing he once loved most. Findings suggest that early cognitive decline often shows up as social withdrawal, especially in group settings where memory and focus are tested. Even before they realize they're struggling, many feel overwhelmed or embarrassed. Stepping back isn't about being tired. It's often quiet self-protection, a way to avoid being exposed before they understand what's happening. Number 3, they stop initiating calls and visits. Irene, 77, had always been the one to reach out. She called her siblings every weekend, sent holiday cards, and never missed a birthday. But nearly 4 years before her dementia diagnosis, something changed. The phone stopped ringing, cards stopped arriving. When family called her instead, she'd answer warmly, but never explain why she hadn't called first. They assumed she was just slowing down. But when her sister visited and found 5 identical grocery lists on the table, concern set in. Later, Irene admitted she'd been feeling scattered and didn't want to bother anyone with her confusion. Recent evidence supports that in early dementia, people often withdraw from regular contact, not because they've forgotten how, but because they feel unsure of what to say. The fear of repeating themselves or forgetting details can lead to quiet silence. When someone who once kept the family connected suddenly stops calling, it may not be disinterest. It might be early doubt in their ability to keep up. Number 4, they start clearing out old mementos. Della, 74, spent years carefully organizing her photo albums. She labeled them with names, dates, and memories from vacations and family milestones. But 2 years before her dementia diagnosis, she began throwing them away. First, loose photos. Then, entire albums vanished. When her daughter asked why, Della said, "They're just clutter. Nobody looks at them anymore." But that wasn't true. She used to flip through them weekly, smiling at the faces she loved. As some of those faces became unfamiliar, Della quietly erased what she could no longer connect to. A new analysis found that early-stage dementia can trigger discomfort when faced with long-term memories. Instead of bringing joy, old photos and keepsakes can cause confusion or emotional distress when the details no longer make sense. Clearing them away isn't because the memories are gone, but because they're beginning to slip, and the person no longer knows how to hold on to them. Number 5. They express interest in estate planning. Maurice, 73, never talked about the end. He avoided funerals, wills, even life insurance. "It's bad luck to plan for the end," he used to say. But 3 years before his Alzheimer's diagnosis, something shifted. He pulled out old folders, asked his daughter for the house deed, and said they needed to get everything in order. He even called a lawyer to update his will. His family was surprised, not because it was unreasonable, but because it was so unlike him. Soon after, they noticed more changes: missed doctor appointments, mixed-up names, and repeated questions. It felt like some part of him already knew what was coming. Scientists confirm that when dementia begins to develop, it can trigger a subtle sense of finality, a quiet pressure to handle unfinished business. The person may not realize they're declining, but something inside pushes them to prepare and hand things off. So when someone who's never cared about legal documents suddenly wants to plan their estate, it might not be fear of the end. It could be their mind starting to let go, one signature at a time. Number 6. They stop talking about the future. Clarence, 76, used to plan months ahead: vacations, birthdays, home projects. He always had something on the calendar, but 2 years before his dementia diagnosis, his family noticed a shift. When his wife mentioned their anniversary trip, he just nodded. When his son asked about Thanksgiving, Clarence said, "Let's just see when we get there." He began avoiding any talk of the future. No more excitement for milestones. No more garden plan. At the time, it seemed like he was living in the moment, but in hindsight, he'd quietly stopped imagining what was ahead. A medical review found that people in early dementia often lose their sense of forward planning. It's not just memory loss. It's the fading ability to imagine or organize future events. This decline can begin before confusion is obvious. When someone who once loved planning suddenly stops talking about the future, it may be their mind turning inward, focusing only on the present because that's all it can manage. Number 7. They begin isolating themselves in subtle ways. Ramona, 79, had always loved being around people, even just sitting quietly in the same room. She'd chat with neighbors, attend church lunches, and call her niece just to hear her voice. But a year and a half before her diagnosis, she began slipping away in silence. She declined lunch invites with vague excuses, closed her blinds during the day, and let calls go to voicemail. Even when family visited, she seemed eager for them to leave. Her world grew smaller, not all at once, but little by little, and for months, no one questioned it. Recent data suggests that early dementia can lead to quiet isolation, not because someone wants to be alone, but because social interaction becomes overwhelming. They may fear embarrassment, feel anxious about forgetting, or grow too drained to keep up. When a person begins stepping back without saying why, it's often not about mood. It may be the brain slowly withdrawing, trying to hide what it's losing. Number 8. They start returning old belongings without explanation. Victor, 78, had a shelf full of books borrowed from friends, novels, cookbooks, gardening guides. Some had been there for over a decade, but about 2 years before his dementia diagnosis, he began returning them all at once, not just to close friends, but even to old acquaintances. He'd show up, hand over the book, and say, "I figured you might want this back." When asked why, he'd just wave it off. His neighbor, who didn't even remember lending him a travel guide, said Victor looked oddly relieved. It seemed like simple tidying at the time, but later, his family realized it was something else, his quiet way of clearing the slate. A clinical study linked this behavior to early awareness of cognitive changes. People may not admit they're forgetting, but they sense confusion. Returning borrowed items can feel like closing loops or finishing unfinished business. If a loved one starts quietly returning things, especially without explanation, it might be more than politeness. It may be their mind's way of lightening the load before memory slips away entirely. Number 9, they say things like, "I won't be around forever." Loretta, 80, had always joked about aging, but in the year before her diagnosis, her tone shifted. At a family dinner, she passed down a pie recipe and said, "I want you to know this in case I'm not around next year." Her daughter laughed, but Loretta didn't. Another time, while helping her grandson with homework, she said softly, "You're going to do just fine without me." These weren't dramatic outbursts, just quiet, oddly timed remarks. Months later, Loretta began misplacing words, repeating questions, and forgetting familiar names. The diagnosis followed: early-stage Alzheimer's. A new study linked these quiet, farewell-like comments to early emotional processing changes in dementia. Even before memory loss is obvious, the person may feel something shifting inside, a vague, unspoken recognition that something is being lost. When someone starts making subtle, reflective statements about not being here, it may not be about age or fear or drama. It may be their way of saying goodbye before the words start slipping away. They don't always forget first, and if you're watching closely, you may notice. The brain doesn't leave all at once. It starts by letting go of little pieces while the person is still right in front of you. Notice the signs, listen to the silences, and you might catch what others never do.
And there you have it. What are your thoughts? Next, dive into this video for more essential tips to transform your health and help you thrive. You're going to love it. Thanks for watching Healthy End, and we'll see you there.